Captain Daniel Foster stood in the center of the vast council chamber and tried not to show his nervousness. Above him, the dome stretched high enough to hold a small city. Around him, representatives from 73 different alien species sat in circular tiers that rose toward the ceiling. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Daniel still had trouble understanding how they communicated. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Krelvan, the Zinthari council leader, raised one of his forearms. His insect-like face showed no expression that Daniel could read, but his voice carried clearly through the translation devices everyone wore. Captain Foster, you stand here representing humanity before this council. We have serious matters to discuss. Daniel nodded. I'm ready to hear your concerns, Ambassador. Krelvan touched a control panel. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing a long list of violations. The text scrolled slowly, and Daniel felt his stomach tighten as he read. In the 3 years since humanity joined this council, your species has broken 47 galactic regulations, Krelvan said. You have established colonies in 12 restricted territories. You have sent exploration vessels beyond the outer rim, into zones this council marked as forbidden 10,000 years ago. From the observation deck above, Lieutenant Amy Parker watched the proceedings. She held a data tablet and took notes, but her real job was to watch for anything unusual. The council had called this emergency session with only 3 days' notice. That alone worried her. Daniel cleared his throat. Ambassador, with respect, we've reviewed the original treaties humanity signed. None of our colonies violate the exact wording of those agreements. The exact wording, Krelvan repeated. His voice carried a tone that the translator rendered as disgust. Yes. You humans are very good at finding loopholes. But the spirit of the law matters more than the letter. High Magistrate Theron spoke next. The Vaxil appeared as a floating sphere of blue energy, pulsing with each word. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years by establishing clear boundaries. We divided the galaxy into safe zones where all species can thrive, forbidden territories too dangerous for colonization, and neutral grounds for commerce and diplomacy. Humanity ignores these boundaries. The hologram changed to show specific human activities, mining operations on moons so radioactive that the readings made the sensors glow red. Settlements on planets with gravity 3 times Earth normal. Research stations in asteroid fields that looked like they'd been through a war. You build cities on death worlds, Counselor Miraseth added. The Olnari diplomat looked like a cross between a frog and an eel, her blue skin glistening under the chamber lights. You treat danger as opportunity. You send your people to places where any other species would die within hours. Daniel felt frustration rising in his chest. We take precautions. Our colonies have excellent safety records. Yes, we choose challenging environments. But that's because humans thrive under pressure. We've never asked other species to join us in these places. That's not the point, Krelvan said sharply. Your reckless expansion threatens the balance we've carefully maintained. The forbidden zones exist for good reasons. Ancient dangers sleep in those territories. Phenomena we don't understand. Ruins of civilizations that vanished mysteriously. Amy's fingers flew across her tablet. Something about Krelvan's words struck her as odd. She pulled up the original survey data for the zones humanity had colonized. Most of the danger warnings were thousands of years old, never updated with modern analysis. The Council has made a decision, Theron announced. We cannot allow humanity to continue this destructive path. You will accept a restriction accord. The hologram shifted again, displaying a formal document. Daniel read it quickly, his heart sinking with each paragraph. The accord has 3 requirements, Krelvan explained. First, humanity must limit all future expansion to Council-approved safe zones. Second, you must submit to Council oversight on all colonial ventures. Third, you must dismantle and evacuate all settlements in forbidden territories within 6 months. That would affect nearly 40% of our colonies, Daniel protested. Millions of people would lose their homes. They chose to live in illegal settlements, Krelvan replied. They knew the risks. What if we refuse? Daniel asked. though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then, humanity will be expelled from this council, Theron said. All trade agreements will be voided. Your ships will be banned from council space stations. Economic sanctions will be imposed until you comply. 2. The threat hung in the air. Earth's economy depended heavily on galactic trade. The technologies humanity had gained through council membership had transformed life on a dozen worlds. Losing that access would cripple human civilization for generations. I need time to consult with my government, Daniel said carefully. You have 72 hours, Krelvan said. Return here with your answer. This session is concluded. The council representatives began filing out of the chamber. Daniel stood alone in the center for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Then he turned and walked toward the exit where Amy waited. Captain, she said quietly as they entered the corridor. I found something strange in the restriction documents. What is it? Amy pulled up a map on her tablet. The forbidden zones they want us to abandon. Look at this one, the Kessler Belt. Daniel studied the display. Our miners just started working there last year. They found something important, didn't they? Evidence of the precursors, Amy confirmed. An ancient civilization that vanished mysteriously. The Council has been searching for precursor artifacts for thousands of years, but they've never found anything substantial. And we found evidence after less than a year, Daniel said slowly. Understanding dawned on him. It's not about safety. Amy shook her head. I checked the other restricted zones. Every single one that humanity colonized has similar characteristics. High radiation, intense gravity, extreme conditions. Exactly the kind of places where fragile precursor technology might survive when it would decay everywhere else. They're afraid of what we might discover, Daniel said. Not just discover, Amy corrected. They're afraid we'll succeed where they failed. The Council species gave up on these territories because they were too dangerous. But danger doesn't stop humans the same way. Daniel stopped walking and looked at his aide. The precursors were more advanced than any current species, right? According to the historical records, yes, significantly more advanced. So if we find their technology, if we learn their secrets, the balance of power in the galaxy changes. Amy nodded. The Council isn't trying to protect us, Captain. They're trying to protect themselves. Daniel pulled out his communication device. He needed to send a message to Earth immediately, but it had to be encrypted. The Council would be monitoring all standard channels. He typed carefully, choosing each word with precision. The message was simple but carried enormous weight. They're not trying to protect us. They're trying to protect themselves. Recommend we refuse the accord and prepare for consequences. Whatever the precursors left behind in those forbidden zones, it's valuable enough that the Council would rather see humanity expelled than let us find it. He sent the message and looked at Amy. How long until we hear back from Earth? At least 36 hours, even with priority routing. Then we wait, Daniel said. And we prepare for whatever comes next. They walked back to their quarters in silence. Behind them, the council chamber stood empty, its dome reflecting the light of distant stars. Somewhere, in those forbidden zones, secrets waited, secrets that had lain hidden for millennia, secrets that humanity might finally be brave enough, or foolish enough, to uncover. The 72-hour countdown had begun. In that time, humanity would make a choice that would change the galaxy forever. Accept the cage of safety that the Council offered, or break free and face whatever dangers and wonders waited in the darkness beyond. Daniel already knew which choice his species would make. Humans didn't back down from challenges. They never had. And they weren't about to start now. Not when the greatest mystery in galactic history was finally within reach. The only question was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready for what would happen when humanity said no. Director Lisa Grant looked around the conference table at the members of Earth's Expansion Council. The room was deep underground in Geneva, protected by layers of security that would survive almost anything. Right now, with the Galactic Council's ultimatum hanging over their heads, that protection felt necessary. Let's be clear about what we're facing, Admiral Kevin Shaw said. He was a tall man, with gray hair, and the kind of face that showed every hard decision he'd ever made. If we refuse this accord, we're looking at economic sanctions from 73 allied species. Our trade network collapses. The technology sharing agreements end. Earth's economy could take decades to recover. If it recovers at all, added the finance minister. We've become dependent on galactic trade. Our colonies need supplies we can't manufacture ourselves yet. Food, medicine, basic equipment. Without council access, people will die. Lisa nodded slowly. Dr. Morris, you asked for this emergency session. What did you find at Kessler Station? Dr. Helen Morris stood up. She was a thin woman with sharp eyes and hands that moved constantly as she talked. For the past 6 months, she'd been leading the xenoarchaeology team studying the precursor ruins in the Kessler Belt. We found a warning, Helen said simply. She activated the holographic display in the center of the table. Ancient text appeared, along with a translation that her team had spent weeks decoding. The precursors called themselves the Builders. They were the dominant civilization in this galaxy over 50,000 years ago, more advanced than anything we have today. Faster ships, better weapons, technology we can barely understand. And they vanished, Lisa said. Every species knows that much. Yes, but we finally learned why. Helen brought up another section of text. They didn't die in a war. They weren't destroyed by a natural disaster. They were consumed by something they called the conformity. Admiral Shaw leaned forward. What does that mean? It's a system of governance, Helen explained. After the Builders became the dominant power, they created rules to maintain peace. They divided the galaxy into zones. Safe areas where exploration was allowed, forbidden territories where it was banned. Neutral grounds for commerce. They established a council to enforce these rules. The room went silent. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying the Galactic Council is based on the same system that destroyed the precursors? Not based on it, Helen said quietly. I think it might be the exact same system. The precursor records describe the conformity lasting for over 10,000 years. Sound familiar? That's how long the current council claims to have maintained peace. But the precursors vanished, the defense secretary pointed out. If the system destroyed them, why is the council still here? Because they learned from the precursors' mistake, Helen said. The Builders enforced their rules absolutely. No exceptions, no flexibility. Within 1,000 years, their civilizations stopped innovating. They stopped exploring. They became so focused on maintaining safety that they forgot how to grow. When a new threat emerged from beyond the galaxy, they couldn't adapt fast enough to survive. Helen changed the display to show a map of forbidden zones. The current council is smarter. They allow limited exploration in safe zones. They permit some innovation. But they still maintain the fundamental structure. The forbidden territories, the restrictions, the focus on balance over growth. They're walking the same path, just more slowly. That's speculation, Admiral Shaw said. But his voice lacked conviction. There's more, Helen continued. We found fragments of this warning in multiple forbidden zones. Not just the Kessler Belt. The precursors deliberately scattered their message across the most dangerous territories in the galaxy. Why? Lisa asked. Because they wanted to make sure only a brave species would find it. Only someone willing to face real danger. Only someone who refused to accept the cage of safety. Helen met Lisa's eyes. They were leaving a message for humanity, even though they didn't know we'd exist. The room fell silent again. Lisa thought about the implications. If Helen was right, the Galactic Council wasn't just afraid of human expansion. They were afraid that humanity would prove the entire system was flawed. We need to hear from the colonies, Lisa said. Conference call, with all the governors in restricted territories. Her aide set up the connection. Within minutes, faces appeared on screens around the room. Marcus Webb from Kessler Station looked tired but determined. Governor Sarah Kim from the Viridian colony showed defiance in every line of her face. The others wore similar expressions. You've all seen the council's ultimatum, Lisa said. You have 6 months to evacuate. What's your response? Marcus spoke first. We're not leaving. The colonists voted this morning. Unanimous decision. We knew the risks when we came here. We're not abandoning our homes because some council is afraid of what we might find. Same here, Sarah added. Viridian has 15,000 people now. We've built farms, factories, homes. We've made lives here. The council can threaten all they want. We're staying. One by one, the other governors agreed. Not a single colony was willing to evacuate. You understand what this means, Admiral Shaw said. The council could use force to remove you. Let them try, Marcus replied. We've fortified our positions. We're not military installations, but we can defend ourselves long enough for help to arrive. If the council wants to drag families out of their homes at gunpoint, let them show the galaxy what their precious balance really means. Lisa made her decision. She'd known what it would be before the meeting started. But she needed to hear from everyone first. Democracy meant listening. Even when the answer was obvious. Admiral Shaw, what are our military options if we refuse the accord? The Admiral pulled up tactical displays. We can't win a conventional war against 73 species. But we don't need to. We just need to make removing us more costly than leaving us alone. I recommend defensive positions around Earth and the major colonies. We make it clear that any attack will be met with serious resistance. Do it, Lisa ordered. Prepare the fleet for defensive operations. She turned to Helen. Keep studying those precursor sites. If there's more information out there, I want it found. There's something else, Helen said hesitantly. The precursor message mentions something called the Archive, a repository of all their knowledge, hidden in the deepest forbidden zones. If we could find it, if we could access their technology, it would change everything. Lisa nodded slowly. Then we find it, whatever it takes. She looked at the faces around the table and on the screens. They all knew what came next. Sanctions, isolation, possibly violence, but they also knew that backing down meant accepting a future of stagnation and control. Draft our response to the council, Lisa said. We decline the restriction accord. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not submit to oversight that other species don't face. And we will not stop exploring forbidden territories. That's going to start a war, the finance minister said quietly. No, Lisa corrected. It's going to start a conversation. We'll offer an alternative. Open the forbidden zones to all species willing to face the risks. Share all discoveries equally. Let every council member choose for themselves whether to explore or stay safe. We're not trying to dominate the galaxy. We're trying to free it from a system that's killing it slowly. The message was drafted, reviewed, and encrypted. Lisa sent it herself, using the highest priority channels. The Galactic Council would receive it within hours. Then they waited. The response came faster than expected. Economic sanctions began immediately. Trade agreements were voided. Human ships received orders to leave Council space stations within 24 hours. The Council was making its position clear. But something unexpected happened. 3 days after the sanctions began, Director Grant received a secret communication. It came through a back channel, heavily encrypted. The message was from Ambassador Tevrek of the Korathi, one of the youngest species in the Council. We've been reading the precursor warnings you discovered, the message said. We want to know more. The Council has forbidden us from exploring beyond safe zones since we joined 70 years ago. Before that, we were explorers. We traveled to the edges of our local cluster. The Council told us we'd be safer if we stopped. Now we wonder if we've been making a mistake. 2 more messages arrived over the next week. The Drell and the Novari, both young Council species, both expressing similar doubts. They'd seen the precursor warnings. They were tired of the restrictions. They wanted to explore again. Lisa shared the messages with her council. Admiral Shaw looked surprised. They're risking expulsion by contacting us. They're risking more than that, Lisa said. They're risking everything their species has built within the council system. But they're doing it anyway, because they're young enough to remember what they gave up, Helen said. The older species have been in the council so long they've forgotten how to be anything else. But these three still remember. Exploration, discovery, growth. They see what humanity is doing, and they want it back. Lisa made another decision. Send them the full precursor data, everything we've found, and invite them to visit our research sites. If they want to explore with us, we'll welcome them. The Council will see that as an act of war. Admiral Shaw warned. The Council already sees our existence as a threat. Lisa replied. We might as well make allies while we're at it. Captain Daniel Foster received new orders. He was to return to Unity Prime and deliver a message in person. Not a surrender. Not a compromise. A statement of principle. Humanity wasn't breaking the balance. Humanity was restoring it. The galaxy had been stagnant for 10,000 years, slowly following the same path that destroyed the precursors. Now humanity was offering a different path. A harder path, full of risks and dangers, but also a path that led to growth, discovery, and a future worth exploring. The question wasn't whether humanity would back down. The question was whether the rest of the galaxy was brave enough to follow. Captain Daniel Foster walked into the council chamber with three unexpected guests. Ambassador Tevrek of the Korathi stood on his right, a reptilian figure with golden scales and sharp, intelligent eyes. On his left were the representatives from the Drell and Novari species, both looking nervous but determined. The council chamber erupted before Daniel even reached the speaking platform. This is unprecedented, Ambassador Krelvin shouted over the noise. You bring council members to testify against the council itself? We're here by choice, Tevrek said. His voice carried clearly through the translation system. Captain Foster didn't ask us to come. We demanded to be here. High Magistrate Theron's energy form pulsed with what the translator interpreted as anger. The Korathi will face severe consequences for this action. We accept those consequences, Tevrek replied. He moved to the center platform beside Daniel. This council needs to hear what we have to say. The human discoveries change everything. Lieutenant Amy Parker watched from the observation deck again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Representatives from a dozen other species had requested observer status for this session. Word of the precursor warnings had spread despite the council's attempts to contain it. Daniel let Tevrek speak first. The Korathi ambassador had earned that right. 70 years ago, my species joined this council, Tevrek began. We were told it would bring us peace, prosperity, and safety. We were told the forbidden zones existed to protect us from dangers we couldn't understand. We accepted these terms because we trusted the council's wisdom. He paused, letting his words sink in. We were lied to. The chamber exploded again. Krelvan demanded order, but the shouting continued for several minutes. When silence finally returned, Tevrek continued. The forbidden zones don't exist to protect us. They exist to hide the truth that this council is following the exact same path that destroyed the precursors, the truth that safety without growth leads to stagnation and death. Counselor Miraseth stood up from her seat. The Olnari diplomat had always been quiet during council sessions, but now she moved to join Tevrek and Daniel on the platform. I've been investigating council records for the past month, Miraseth said. I used my diplomatic clearance to access archives that most of you have never seen. What I found should terrify every species in this chamber. She activated her own holographic display. Ancient documents appeared, written in languages that required 3 levels of translation to understand. The Galactic Council has known about the precursor warnings for over 2,000 years. The first expeditions into forbidden zones found fragments of the message. Council leadership at the time decided to classify the information at the highest level. They buried it so deep that even most current council members don't know it exists. Admiral Shaw watched the proceedings from Earth, transmitted in real time through encrypted channels. He sat in the command center, surrounded by tactical displays showing fleet positions. So far, The Council's military forces hadn't moved, but that could change at any moment. Miraseth continued her presentation. The Council didn't want species to know that our civilization is built on the same principles that destroyed the precursors. They didn't want questions about whether our restrictions and forbidden zones are truly for safety or simply for control. This is conspiracy theory, Krelvan protested. Ancient documents taken out of context. Then explain this, Miraseth said. She brought up a specific record. A memo from a council session held 1800 years ago. The text was clear even through multiple translations. The council leadership discussing whether to reveal the precursor warnings to member species. They voted against it, 23 in favor of disclosure, 47 against. The majority decided that maintaining stability was more important than truth. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the species that supported Krelvan looked shaken. Daniel chose that moment to speak. At Kessler Station, our research team made a breakthrough 3 days ago. Dr. Morris, our lead scientist, activated a precursor facility that's been dormant for over 50,000 years. He shared the data that Helen had sent him. The holographic archive appeared above the platform, massive and detailed. Ancient text filled the air, along with images and data streams that made even the most advanced council technology look primitive. This is the precursor message in full, Daniel said. Not fragments. Not hints. The complete warning they left for whoever would be brave enough to find it. Number 4. Amy had worked with Helen to time the broadcast perfectly. As Daniel spoke, the same holographic archive began transmitting to every human colony and to the 3 allied species' homeworlds. Within minutes, billions of beings across the galaxy were seeing the precursor warnings for the first time. The message was clear and damning. The precursors had created a system of total safety after becoming the dominant galactic power. They'd divided space into zones, forbidden exploration beyond certain boundaries, and created a council to enforce these rules. For 10,000 years, the system worked. Peace reigned. No wars, no conflicts, no dangers. But it came at a cost. Innovation stopped. Exploration ended. The precursors became so focused on maintaining what they had that they forgot how to grow. When a new threat emerged from beyond the galaxy, something the precursors called the void entities, they couldn't adapt. Their technology had stagnated. Their tactics were outdated. Their people had forgotten how to face real challenges. The precursors didn't die fighting the void entities. They died because they'd spent 10,000 years learning how to be safe instead of learning how to be strong. The survivors scattered the warnings across the galaxy, hiding them in the most dangerous territories because they understood something crucial. Only a species brave enough to face real danger would ever find the message. Only a species that refused to accept comfortable safety would be able to break the cycle. Commander Ryan Mitchell's voice came through Daniel's earpiece. Captain, we're picking up unusual activity in Council space. Ships moving toward human colonies. Not in attack formation yet, but they're getting into position. Daniel kept his expression neutral. How many ships? 17 Council species have dispatched fleets. They're surrounding our settlements in forbidden zones. The military response was beginning. But something else was happening too. I'm also seeing something unexpected, Ryan continued. 12 other Council species are sending their own ships, but they're not joining the blockade. They're requesting permission to approach our research sites. They want to see the precursor facilities for themselves. In the council chamber, representatives were arguing loudly. Some demanded humanity's immediate expulsion. Others wanted access to the precursor data. The youngest council members were already preparing to leave the chamber, clearly intending to join the human expedition. We cannot allow this fracture, Krelvan said desperately. The council has maintained unity for 10,000 years. If we split now, it will lead to chaos. Unity built on lies is not worth maintaining, Tevrek replied. The precursors learned that lesson too late. We still have time to choose differently. Councillor Miraseth addressed the full chamber. I propose we dissolve the restriction accord and create a new agreement. An exploration alliance. Any species can join. The only requirement is willingness to share discoveries and face the unknown together. No forced restrictions. No forbidden zones. Just honest acknowledgement that growth requires risk. That's insane, Theron said. The forbidden zones exist for real reasons. There are dangers out there that could destroy entire civilizations. Yes, Daniel agreed. There are real dangers. But there are also real opportunities. The precursors hid their most advanced technology in the deepest forbidden zones. Not to torment us, but to test us. They wanted to make sure only a species willing to face danger could access tools that require courage to use properly. You're asking us to abandon 10,000 years of stability, Krelvan said. I'm asking you to choose growth over stagnation, Daniel replied. The stability you're so proud of is the same stability that killed the precursors. How long before it kills us, too? The council called for a vote. It was unprecedented. A fundamental restructuring of galactic governance being decided in a single session. But the precursor revelations had forced the issue. The voting took 3 hours. Species representatives consulted with their homeworlds, debated among themselves, and wrestled with a decision that would reshape the galaxy. When the results came in, the fracture was complete. 43 species voted to maintain the old system. They wanted to keep the restriction accord, the forbidden zones, the careful balance that had preserved peace for millennia. They would rather accept stagnation than risk chaos. 30 species voted to join the Exploration Alliance. They accepted the risks in exchange for the freedom to grow. The youngest species were unanimous in their choice, but surprisingly, several older council members joined them too. Species that had been quietly chafing under restrictions for centuries saw their chance to break free. The Galactic Council split. After 10,000 years of unity, the galaxy had two competing visions for the future. Director Lisa Grant addressed both factions from Earth. Her message was broadcast across all channels, impossible to block or filter. Humanity will share the precursor technology freely with all species, she said. Even those who voted against us. The archive is too important to be kept as leverage or used to create new power imbalances. We're not trying to dominate the galaxy, we're trying to save it from repeating the precursor's mistake. The gesture shocked both factions. Species from the old council immediately requested observer status in the alliance. They weren't ready to commit fully, but they wanted to see if humanity's approach actually worked. General Patricia Hayes of the Zenthari became the first non-human officer to officially join the Alliance fleet. She brought with her 30 warships and a simple explanation. I'm old enough to remember when we were explorers. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired. I'm. The galaxy had fractured, but it wasn't breaking. It was transforming. And at the center of that transformation stood humanity. The species too stubborn or too brave to accept that the unknown should remain that way forever. The meeting room on the Zenthari homeworld was smaller than the Grand Council chamber, but it held more military power. 40 species had sent their top commanders. Ambassador Krelvan stood at the head of the table, his 4 arms gesturing as he spoke. The Alliance cannot be allowed to succeed, Krelvan said. If humanity proves that exploration without restriction works, more species will abandon the Council. Within a generation, everything we've built will collapse. General Patricia Hayes had not attended this meeting. She was already commanding Alliance vessels near human colonies. Her second-in-command, Colonel Vernon Drake, represented the Zenthari military instead. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? Drake asked carefully. Forced evacuation, Krelvan replied. Not invasion. Not destruction. We surround the human colonies in forbidden territories, disable their vessels, and transport everyone back to Council-approved zones. Then we seal the forbidden areas with automated defense platforms. Permanently. Drake reviewed the tactical plans. This is a massive operation. You're talking about evacuating millions of people from dozens of colonies simultaneously. It's the only way, High Magistrate Theron said. If we act against one colony at a time, the others will prepare defenses. We need overwhelming force applied everywhere at once. They surrender or face military action. You're going to start a war, Drake said quietly. We're preventing one, Krelvan corrected. Humanity's reckless expansion will lead to catastrophe. They'll wake something in those forbidden zones that none of us can control. Better to stop them now while we still can. The plan was named Restoration Protocol. Council military forces would assemble in secret, then strike simultaneously at every human settlement in restricted space. The humans would have no choice but to surrender. On Earth, Admiral Kevin Shaw received intelligence about the military buildup from Alliance sources. General Hayes had allies still serving in the Council forces, and they were sending warnings. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Shaw said to his command staff. 40 species are mobilizing their fleets. That's more firepower than we can possibly defend against. Commander Ryan Mitchell studied the tactical displays. Red markers showed Council fleet positions. Blue markers showed human and Alliance forces. The numbers weren't even close. "We can't protect all the colonies simultaneously," Ryan said. "If we spread our forces thin, we won't be able to defend anything effectively. I recommend consolidating around Earth and the core settlements. We abandon the outer colonies." "No," the voice came through the communication system. Marcus Webb, governor of Kessler Station, appeared on the screen. "We're not evacuating. The colonists have already voted. We're staying." Sarah Kim from Viridian Colony joined the call. "Same here. We knew this might happen when we settled in forbidden space. We're not running now." One by one, the other colonial governors joined the conversation. Not a single settlement was willing to evacuate. They'd built homes, raised families, and established communities in the harshest environments the galaxy could offer. They weren't going to surrender them without a fight. "You're asking us to defend positions we can't hold," Admiral Shaw said bluntly. "I can send ships to each colony, but they'll be overwhelmed within hours." "Then don't defend us," Marcus replied. "Give us time instead." "Time for what?" Captain Daniel Foster had a different idea. He'd been working with Dr. Helen Morris on something desperate, something that only humans would be crazy enough to attempt. The precursor archive included coordinates, Daniel explained to the Admiral. Locations of facilities in the deepest forbidden zones, places so dangerous that even the Council's old guard won't follow. If we can reach those facilities before the Council fleet arrives, we might find technology that changes everything. "Those zones are called forbidden for good reasons," Admiral Shaw said. "Ships that enter don't come back. Spatial anomalies, radiation storms, automated defense systems that are still active after 50,000 years. Which is exactly why the precursors hid their most important technology there," Helen added. "They wanted to make sure only a truly determined species would find it. Only someone willing to risk everything." "Helen." "I'm State." "Helen." Lieutenant Amy Parker volunteered immediately. "I'll lead the expedition. We take our fastest ships, best pilots, and smartest scientists. We get in, find what we're looking for, and get out before the Council realizes what we're doing." Admiral Shaw looked at the tactical situation. He was being asked to split his forces in the face of overwhelming enemy numbers. Every military instinct he had screamed that it was suicide, but every human instinct told him it was exactly what they needed to do. "How long do you need?" he asked Amy. 7 days to reach the first deep facility. Maybe 3 more to access the technology. Assuming we survive that long, I can buy you 10 days, Admiral Shaw decided. After that, if you haven't found anything, we consolidate our forces and prepare for a siege around Earth. "And the outer colonies?" Marcus asked. "We evacuate deeper into forbidden space," Commander Ryan said. "The Council fleet won't follow into the most dangerous zones. We play a game of cat and mouse, stay ahead of them until Lieutenant Parker's team succeeds, or until we run out of places to run," Sarah added quietly. The plan was insane. It relied on everything going perfectly in multiple locations simultaneously. But it was the only option that didn't end in immediate surrender. The Galactic Council fleet arrived at human colonies expecting quick capitulation. Instead, they found empty settlements. The humans had packed up everything they could carry and fled deeper into forbidden space, toward zones that even military vessels avoided. Colonel Drake commanded the Zenthari forces assigned to Kessler Station. He brought his ships out of faster-than-light travel, expecting to see the bustling mining colony. Instead, he found abandoned buildings and a single message broadcast on all frequencies. "You want us to stay in safe zones? Come get us. They've gone into the Void Nebula," his sensor officer reported. "Radiation levels there will kill any crew within hours. Humans have better shielding than we do," Drake said. "They can survive longer, but not forever." How many other colonies did this? These are Sev. The reports came in from other council commanders. Every human settlement in forbidden territories had evacuated into even worse locations. The Andromeda Cluster, where gravity fluctuations made navigation nearly impossible. The Crimson Wastes, where ancient weapons platforms still fired at anything that moved. The Phantom Expanse, where ships simply disappeared without explanation. "They're insane," Ambassador Krelvan said when he heard the reports. "Do they expect us to believe they can survive in those places?" "They don't expect you to believe anything," General Hayes transmitted from her Alliance flagship. "They're betting you're too afraid to follow them. And they're right. They're right." Krelvan ordered the fleets to pursue, but his captains hesitated. The zones humanity had fled into weren't just dangerous. They were deadly. Even the precursors had marked them as too hazardous for settlement. "They can't stay there forever," Theron argued. "Their supplies will run out. We can wait." But while the Council fleet waited outside the deadly zones, Lieutenant Amy Parker's expedition was making progress in an entirely different direction. Her team consisted of 5 ships and the bravest crew members from 3 different species. They'd entered the deep core, a region of space so dense with radiation and spatial distortions that sensors couldn't function properly. Navigation was done by instinct and luck, neither of which should work but somehow did. "I'm reading something ahead," the science officer reported. "Massive structure. It's not natural." The precursor facility appeared through the radiation storms like a ghost. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. And it was still active. Lights pulsed across its surface in patterns that suggested intelligence. "That's been here for 50,000 years, Amy said in awe. Dr. Helen Morris was already working on accessing the facility's systems. The precursor archive had included entry codes, but they were so complex that even Helen's best computer needed an hour to process them. The facility came alive as they approached. Automated defenses activated, weapons systems that made human technology look like children's toys. For a terrible moment, Amy thought they would be destroyed. Then the weapons powered down. The facility had recognized the entry codes. More than that, it had recognized what they represented. Only someone who'd found the archive and understood its message would have these codes. Only someone brave enough to enter the deep core deserved access to what waited inside. "We're being invited in," Helen said, her voice shaking with excitement. The facility was a complete archive of precursor knowledge. Not just fragments or hints, but everything. Ship designs, weapons technology, power generation systems, terraforming tools, medical advances that could cure diseases humans didn't even have names for yet, agricultural techniques that could turn barren rocks into gardens. But more than technology, the facility contained information. The true history of the galaxy, going back not just 50,000 years, but 5 million. The precursors weren't the first civilization to rise and fall. They were the 6th. Each previous civilization had followed the same pattern. Rise, dominance, safety protocols, stagnation, collapse. This is the test, Helen realized. The precursors didn't just leave warnings. They left a gift for whoever was brave enough to pass the test. For whoever refused to choose safety over growth. Amy began downloading everything. The data was massive, more than their ships could carry. But the facility had its own solution. It could transmit the information directly to any location in the galaxy, completely bypassing normal communication channels. "Send it everywhere," Amy ordered. "Every human colony, every Alliance species homeworld, every single member of the Old Council. Let everyone see what we found." The transmission began. Across the galaxy, Beings watched as the complete precursor archive appeared on their screens. The technology, the history, the proof that the cycle of stagnation could be broken. General Patricia Hayes was commanding the defensive fleet when the transmission reached her. She read through the technical specifications for precursor ship engines and started laughing. "What's so funny?" her first officer asked. "We've been using chemical rockets and basic fusion drives," Hayes said. "The precursors had engines that could cross the galaxy in weeks, and they left us the blueprints." On the Zenthari flagship, Colonel Drake received the same transmission. He reviewed the precursor weapons technology and understood immediately that the balance of power had just shifted completely. The Council's military advantage was gone. Any species with access to this archive could build fleets that made current warships look primitive. But the most important part of the transmission wasn't the technology. It was the message that came with it. Lieutenant Amy Parker spoke directly to the galaxy. "The precursors left us a choice. We can continue down the path of safety and restriction, following the pattern that destroyed 6 civilizations before us. Or we can choose growth, accept the risks, and build something that lasts. The technology in this archive only works for those who use it to explore, not to conquer. It's the precursor's final safeguard. Only those who've learned the lesson can benefit from the gift." The transmission ended with coordinates. Hundreds of them. Every precursor facility in the galaxy, including dozens in the deepest forbidden zones. The invitation was clear. Come explore. Come learn. Come grow. But only if you're brave enough to face what waits in the darkness. Ambassador Krelvan watched the transmission and understood that he'd lost. The galaxy would never return to the old way. Humanity had broken the cycle. And there was no going back. Lieutenant Amy Parker stood inside the precursor facility and watched as the last of the archive data finished transmitting. The massive chamber around her hummed with energy that had been waiting 50,000 years to be released. Dr. Helen Morris worked at a control panel, her fingers moving across symbols that were old when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. "The archive is responding to something," Helen said. "It's not just sending data. It's receiving confirmation signals from across the galaxy. Species are accessing the information. They're activating other facilities." Amy checked her communication system. Messages were flooding in from dozens of sources. Alliance species were reporting success at other precursor sites. Even some members of the Old Council were secretly entering forbidden zones to see the technology for themselves. But the most important message came from an unexpected source. General Patricia Hayes transmitted directly to Amy's ship. "Lieutenant, I'm forwarding you a communication from Colonel Drake. He's commander of the Zenthari forces that were supposed to evacuate our colonies. You need to hear what he's saying." Drake's face appeared on Amy's screen. The Zenthari officer looked tired, but there was something else in his expression. "Relief, maybe, or hope. Lieutenant Parker, I've reviewed the archive data you transmitted, so has my entire crew. We've been watching the same information spreading across the galaxy, and we've been having discussions that would have been impossible a week ago." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My orders were to force human colonies out of forbidden territories, to help restore the old balance. But after seeing what you found, after understanding what the precursors were warning us about, I can't follow those orders in good conscience." Amy felt hope rising in her chest, but kept her expression neutral. "What are you saying, Colonel?" "I'm saying the Zenthari fleet under my command is standing down. We won't participate in forced evacuations. We won't seal the forbidden zones, and we're requesting permission to join the Exploration Alliance." The words hung in the air. A full Zenthari battle fleet. One of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, switching sides. "Your commander, General Hayes, will need to approve that," Amy said. "I've already spoken to her," Drake replied. "She said the decision was mine to make. I'm making it." At Unity Prime, the Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Ambassador Krelvan tried to maintain order, but representatives were shouting over each other, demanding answers, making accusations. The careful structure that had governed the galaxy for 10,000 years was falling apart in real time. Captain Daniel Foster stood in the center of the chamber again. But this time, he wasn't defending humanity. He was offering a solution. "The archive proves what we've been saying," Daniel said when the noise finally died down. "The precursors didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they chose safety over growth. They built a system that eliminated risk, and in doing so, they eliminated the ability to adapt and survive." Counselor Miraseth joined him on the platform. She'd spent the past week reviewing the complete precursor history. And what she'd found had shaken her to her core. 6 civilizations before us, Miraseth said. 6 times, species rose to dominance, created safety protocols, divided the galaxy into zones, and slowly stagnated into extinction. The precursors were different only because they realized their mistake before it was too late. They scattered warnings and technology across the galaxy, hoping the next cycle would learn. And humanity found it. Krelvan said bitterly. Humanity, the youngest, most reckless species in the Council, stumbled onto knowledge that eluded us for thousands of years. Not stumbled, Daniel corrected. We found it because we were willing to look in places you were too afraid to search. That's not luck, Ambassador. That's the difference between choosing growth and choosing stagnation. High Magistrate Theron's energy form pulsed with agitation. You're asking us to abandon 10,000 years of stability. To throw away everything that's kept the peace. I'm asking you to admit that your peace was slowly killing you, Daniel replied. The archive includes population data for all Council species over the past 5,000 years. Do you want to know what it shows? He activated a holographic display. The data was damning. Innovation rates for Council species had been declining steadily for millennia. Birth rates were dropping. Even basic scientific advancement had slowed to a crawl. The galaxy wasn't at peace. It was dying quietly. The only species showing growth in any meaningful category are the ones who joined the Council most recently, Daniel continued. The youngest members still remember how to take risks, how to explore, how to push boundaries. But give them another few centuries of restrictions, and they'll be just like the rest of you, safe, comfortable, and slowly fading. The chamber fell silent. Even Krelvan had no response to the data. Miraseth spoke again. I'm proposing we formally dissolve the Restriction Accord and replace it with the Exploration Alliance Charter. Any species can join. The only requirements are willingness to share discoveries, respect for other species' autonomy, and commitment to growth through exploration rather than conquest. What about the Forbidden Zones? Someone asked. We reclassify them as challenge zones, Miraseth said. We acknowledge the dangers but don't forbid entry. Species that want to explore can do so. Those that prefer safety can stay in established territories. Everyone chooses for themselves. That will lead to chaos, Theron protested. It will lead to diversity, Daniel corrected. Some species will explore aggressively. Others will focus on developing what they already have. Some will specialize in science, others in art, others in philosophy. Instead of forcing everyone to follow the same path, we let each species find their own way forward. Director Lisa Grant addressed the Council from Earth via transmission. Her message had been prepared carefully. Designed to appeal to both factions, humanity will share the precursor technology freely with all species, Lisa said. No restrictions, no conditions, no requirements. We're not trying to create a new power structure. We're trying to ensure that the knowledge meant to save the galaxy actually reaches everyone who needs it. The gesture was calculated to disarm opposition, and it worked. Species that had been preparing to fight humanity suddenly had no reason for conflict. The technology they wanted was being offered freely. The question wasn't whether to oppose the alliance, but whether to join it. The Council took another vote. This time, the outcome was different. 17 species voted to maintain the old Restriction Accord. They would continue following the safety protocols, living in established territories, avoiding forbidden zones. They weren't ready to change, and the Alliance respected that choice. 56 species voted to join the Exploration Alliance. Some, enthusiastically, embracing the chance to explore freely, others cautiously, wanting to see if humanity's approach actually worked before committing fully. But all of them agreed that the old system needed to change. The Galactic Council split officially. The old council maintained control of Unity Prime and the established safe zones. The Exploration Alliance established a new headquarters on a station at the edge of known space, symbolically positioned at the boundary between safe territory and the unknown. General Patricia Hayes took command of the Alliance's combined fleet. She was the obvious choice, respected by both human and alien officers, experienced in combat, but committed to exploration over conquest. Admiral Kevin Shaw coordinated the defensive networks around Earth and the core human colonies. The threat of forced evacuation was over, but vigilance was still necessary. Not everyone in the old council accepted the split peacefully. Dr. Helen Morris led the scientific team studying precursor facilities across the galaxy. There were hundreds of sites to explore, each containing unique knowledge and technology. It would take generations to catalog everything. Lieutenant Amy Parker received a promotion to commander and took charge of the Deep Space Exploration Division. Her first mission was to follow the coordinates the precursors had left for their descendants. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, the precursor civilization still existed, transformed and thriving. 6 months after the split, the Alliance launched its first major expedition. Admiral Shaw commanded a fleet of 200 ships from 30 different species. They were heading beyond the known galaxy, into space that no one had ever mapped. Captain Daniel Foster served as diplomatic officer on the flagship. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, he thought about how much had changed in such a short time. A year ago, humanity had been a junior member of the Galactic Council, constantly fighting against restrictions and limitations. Now they were co-founders of an alliance that spanned most of the galaxy, leading an expedition into the complete unknown. The journey wasn't easy. 3 ships were lost in the first month to spatial anomalies. 2 more suffered critical damage from automated defense systems that the precursors had left behind. But the expedition pressed on, learning from each setback, adapting to each challenge. On Earth, Director Lisa Grant received regular reports from the expedition. She also received requests from old Council species, asking about joining the Alliance. The number grew each week. 17 holdouts had become 12, then 8, then 5. Ambassador Krelvan remained on Unity Prime, governing what remained of the old Council. The Zenthari leader had aged visibly in the past months. He'd spent his entire life maintaining the balance, believing it was the only way to preserve peace. Now he watched that balance crumble and wondered if he'd been wrong all along. Counselor Miraseth visited him one evening. The Olnari diplomat had officially joined the Alliance but still maintained ties to her old colleagues. "You're not angry?" Krelvan asked her. "At humanity? For breaking everything we built?" Miraseth considered the question. "No. I'm grateful. We were dying slowly. And we'd convinced ourselves it was peace. They showed us the truth. Whether we act on that truth is our choice. And if chaos results, if the galaxy tears itself apart, then we'll learn from it and try again," Miraseth said. "That's what growth means, Krelvan. Trying, failing, learning, and trying again." The precursors understood that. They failed, but they left us the tools to succeed. The only real failure would be refusing to try at all. Isabel Krelvan had no response. He'd spent 10,000 years of collective history believing that the greatest virtue was maintaining stability. Now he was learning that maybe, just maybe, the greatest virtue was the courage to change. The Alliance expedition found the precursor descendants 3 months into their journey. The civilization had transformed beyond recognition. Spread across an entire galaxy of their own, they welcomed the Alliance ships with joy, thrilled that someone had finally been brave enough to pass the test. The precursors shared more technology, more knowledge, and most importantly, more hope. They'd been alone for 50,000 years, waiting for someone to join them. Now the Alliance brought news of a galaxy learning to grow again, choosing courage over fear. Commander Amy Parker stood on the bridge of the expedition flagship, and looked at the alien stars surrounding them. Behind them lay the known galaxy, split between those who chose safety and those who chose growth. Ahead lay infinite possibility. "What are you thinking?" Captain Daniel asked. "I'm thinking the precursors left us more than technology," Amy said. "They left us a choice, and we chose right. Some might argue we chose chaos." "Maybe," Amy agreed. "But I'd rather have chaos with hope than order without future." The expedition spent 6 months with the precursor descendants before returning home. They brought back technology that would revolutionize the Alliance, knowledge that would reshape understanding of the universe, and most importantly, proof that breaking the cycle was possible. 1 year after the split, the Exploration Alliance had grown to 63 member species. The old council had shrunk to just 3 holdouts, species so committed to the old ways that they refused to change despite all evidence. 5 years later, even the last holdouts joined the Alliance. Not because they were forced, but because they saw what growth looked like. They saw species thriving instead of stagnating. They saw innovation returning, birth rates climbing, hope spreading across the galaxy like a fire that had been waiting millennia to be lit. The Galactic Council didn't end, it transformed. The careful balance that had governed for 10,000 years gave way to something messier, more chaotic, but infinitely more alive. Species explored freely, failed occasionally, learned constantly, and grew together. And at the center of that transformation stood humanity. The species that had been too stubborn, or too brave, to accept that the unknown should stay that way forever. They hadn't broken the balance, they'd broken the cage, and in doing so, they'd given the galaxy something it had lost long ago, a future worth exploring.